She weighed more than the other brides. That's what killed her chances before she ever set foot in Montana. Naomi Carter had crossed half a continent on a promise. Marriage to a rancher who needed a wife. A new life where hard work mattered more than a narrow waist. But when Caleb Ward saw her step off that stagecoach, something in his face went cold. No greeting, no smile. Just a long, measuring silence that told her everything. She wasn't what he'd expected. And in a town where survival meant being strong enough, fast enough, useful enough, being unwanted might be the one thing that could break her. If you want to see how a woman who was rejected at first sight became the one thing this brutal land couldn't destroy, stay with me until the end. And hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Naomi's story travels. The stagecoach lurched to a stop, and Naomi Carter's stomach dropped with it. Not from the motion. She'd gotten used to that over the past 11 days. The relentless jostling, the dust that crept into every fold of her dress, the way her body ached from being wedged into a seat built for someone half her size. No, this feeling was different. This was the sick, crawling dread of arrival. Through the small window, she could see Ridgestone, Montana, if you could even call it that. A scattering of wooden buildings squatting in the dirt like they'd been dropped there by accident. A general store with peeling paint. A saloon that looked like it might collapse if someone sneezed. And everywhere, dust and silence, and the kind of emptiness that made a person feel small. Naomi pressed her hand against her stomach, trying to steady her breathing. This is it. This is your new life. The other passenger, a thin, sharp-faced woman named Mrs. Talbot, who'd spent most of the journey making pointed comments about proper ladies and maintaining one's figure, gathered her skirts and stood. She didn't look at Naomi, hadn't really looked at her since St. Louis. "Well," Mrs. Talbot said, her voice clipped, "I suppose we've arrived, such as it is." Naomi didn't respond. She was busy trying to figure out how to exit the coach without making a spectacle of herself. The doorway was narrow, the steps were steep, and she was acutely aware that people were watching. She could feel their eyes even before she saw them. The driver opened the door, and Mrs. Talbot descended with practiced ease, her narrow frame slipping through the opening like water. Then she was gone, swallowed by the small crowd gathered near the stage stop. Naomi took a breath, then another. "You've come too far to fall apart now." She gathered her skirts, dark blue cotton, practical, the nicest thing she owned, and maneuvered herself toward the door. The driver, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained teeth, offered his hand. She took it, grateful for the steadiness of his grip as she navigated the steps. When her feet hit the ground, she felt the shift immediately. The crowd's attention, which had been scattered, focused, narrowed. She didn't have to look to know what they were seeing. A big woman, not just tall, though she was that too, standing nearly 5'9" in her worn boots, but broad, heavy. The kind of figure that had made her mother sigh with disappointment and the boys back home smirk behind their hands. The kind of body that didn't fit the fairy tale. And this, coming here to marry a stranger, this was supposed to be her fairy tale. Naomi lifted her chin and forced herself to look around. The crowd was small, maybe a dozen people. Men mostly, their faces weathered by sun and wind. A few women in faded calico. And standing slightly apart from the rest, her breath caught. Caleb Ward. It had to be him. The description from his letter matched. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair that needed cutting. But the letter hadn't mentioned the way he stood. Perfectly still, like a man who'd forgotten how to move. Or the expression on his face. Blank. Completely, utterly blank. Naomi's hands tightened on her carpet bag. She waited for him to step forward, to say something, to give her any indication that he recognized her as the woman he'd agreed to marry. He didn't move. The silence stretched. Someone in the crowd coughed. Mrs. Talbot, now reunited with what appeared to be her sister, cast a glance back at Naomi. Not sympathetic, just curious. Watching to see what would happen. Naomi's face burned. Say something. Do something. Don't just stand there. But Caleb Ward stood there. Finally, when the silence had gone from awkward to excruciating, he took a step forward, then another. His boots kicked up small clouds of dust with each movement. When he was close enough that Naomi could see the lines around his eyes, the scar cutting through his left eyebrow, He stopped. Miss Carter. His voice was low, rough, like he didn't use it much. Mr. Ward. Her own voice came out steadier than she felt. It's good to finally meet you. Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. Then it was gone, replaced by that same careful blankness. You have other bags? He asked. Yes, 2 trunks. I'll get them. He turned away before she could finish, moving toward the back of the coach where the driver was already unloading luggage. Naomi stood there, her carpet bag clutched in both hands, feeling the weight of a dozen stares. This is fine, she told herself. He's just reserved. Shy, maybe. Some men are like that. But she'd read his letters, all 3 of them. They'd been brief, practical, but not cold. He'd told her about the ranch, about needing help with the work, about losing his mother the previous winter and realizing he couldn't manage alone. He'd asked about her experience with livestock, with gardens, with the kinds of tasks a frontier wife would face. And when she'd written back honestly, yes, she could work. Yes, she was strong. Yes, she understood this wouldn't be easy. He'd written again. I don't need fancy, he'd said. I need capable. If you're willing, I'll send the money for passage. The money had come. She'd used it. And now here she was, watching her future husband haul her trunks into the back of a wagon without once looking at her. One of the men from the crowd, older, with a gray beard and kind eyes, approached. Don't mind Caleb, he said quietly. He's not much for talking. Never has been. Naomi managed a smile. Thank you, Mr. Pruitt, Samuel Pruitt. I run the general store. He gestured toward the building with the peeling paint. You need anything? You come see me. My wife, Martha. She'll want to meet you proper once you're settled. That's very kind. Ridgestone's small, but we take care of our own. He paused, his gaze flicking toward Caleb, who was securing the last trunk. Give him time. The man's had a hard year. Before Naomi could respond, Caleb returned. Ready, he said. Not, are you ready? Just ready, like it wasn't a question. Yes, see, Naomi said. I'm ready. He turned and walked toward the wagon. Naomi followed, acutely aware of every step, every movement. The wagon was sturdy but plain, pulled by 2 horses that looked as tired as she felt. Caleb climbed up to the driver's seat without offering to help her up. Naomi stared at the wagon. The seat was high. The step was narrow. You can do this. You've done harder things. She hiked her skirts, grabbed the side of the wagon, and hauled herself up. It wasn't graceful. Her boot slipped once, and she had to use more arm strength than she wanted to, but she made it. She settled onto the bench, breathing a little harder than she'd like, and arranged her skirts. Caleb didn't look at her. He just picked up the reins and clicked his tongue. The horses started forward. They left Ridgestone behind in silence. The road, if you could call it that, was barely more than 2 ruts carved into the prairie. The wagon jolted over rocks and dips, each impact traveling straight up Naomi's spine. She gripped the edge of the seat and tried to focus on the landscape. It was vast. That was the only word for it. Rolling grassland that stretched to the horizon in every direction, broken only by the occasional cluster of cottonwoods or the dark line of distant hills. The sky was enormous, a blue so deep it almost hurt to look at. And the silence was absolute. Back home in Ohio, there was always noise. Neighbors calling to each other, chickens clucking, the rattle of wagons on cobblestone streets. Here, there was nothing but the creak of the wagon wheels and the steady breathing of the horses. Naomi glanced at Caleb. His profile was sharp against the sky, strong jaw, straight nose, lips pressed into a thin line. He hadn't said a word since they left town. How far is it? She asked finally. To the ranch? 10 miles. She waited for him to elaborate. He didn't. And you run it alone? The ranch? Had a hired man. Left last month. Oh. She paused. Is it large? The ranch? 300 acres, 40 head of cattle, some chickens, 2 horses. His tone was flat, like he was reciting an inventory. That's a lot for one person. He didn't respond. Naomi felt something twist in her chest. Not quite anger, not yet, but close. She'd traveled 2,000 miles, spent every penny she had, left behind the only life she'd ever known. And this man, her husband, or soon-to-be, couldn't even manage basic conversation. "Mr. Ward," she said, and this time there was an edge to her voice. "If I've done something to offend you, I'd appreciate you telling me what it is." His hands tightened on the reins. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, "You haven't." "Then why—" She stopped, swallowed. "You asked me to come here. You sent the money. But now that I'm here, you won't even look at me." Something shifted in his jaw. A muscle jumped, but he still didn't turn his head. "I'm looking," he said quietly. "You know what I mean." The wagon hit a particularly deep rut, and Naomi had to grab the seat to keep from sliding. When she'd steadied herself, she found Caleb watching her. Finally. Actually watching her. His eyes were gray, dark gray like storm clouds. "You're not what I expected," he said. There it was. The thing she'd been dreading since she stepped off that stagecoach. "No," she said, her voice tight. "I suppose I'm not." "The letters didn't—" He stopped, shook his head. "Never mind." "Didn't what? Didn't mention that I'm fat?" The word came out harsh, bitter. She hadn't meant to say it, but now that it was out there, she couldn't take it back. Caleb's expression didn't change. "I was going to say the letters didn't mention you were tall." Naomi blinked. "What?" "You're tall. Most women, you're taller." She stared at him, trying to figure out if he was mocking her, but his face was serious, completely serious. "That's what you noticed?" she asked. "That I'm tall and strong." He glanced at her hands, rough and calloused from years of work. "You do hard work. I can see it." Something in Naomi's chest loosened, just a fraction. "I do," she said. "I worked in my uncle's feed store for 6 years. Before that, I helped my mother with laundry. I'm not afraid of work, Mr. Ward." "Caleb." "What?" "My name. It's Caleb." He turned back to the road. "You'll be my wife. Seems strange to keep calling me Mr. Ward." "Oh." She absorbed that. "Then you should call me Naomi." He nodded once. "Naomi." The way he said it, careful, deliberate, made something flutter in her stomach. She told herself it was just nerves. They rode in silence for another mile, but this silence felt different, less hostile, more uncertain, like both of them were trying to figure out what came next. Finally, Caleb spoke again. "The house needs work." "What kind of work?" "Everything. Roof leaks, floorboards are loose. Haven't had time to fix it proper." He paused. "And it's small, just 2 rooms. I built a lean-to for storage, but that's it." "I don't need much space," Naomi said. "Still, you should know what you're getting." "I already know. You told me in your letters. Letters can make things sound better than they are." She almost smiled. "So can photographs. But neither of us sent those, did we?" His mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was something. "No," he said. "Didn't see the point." "Neither did I." They hit another rut. Naomi braced herself, and this time when the wagon jolted, her shoulder bumped against Caleb's. He didn't pull away. Met. The ranch appeared suddenly, rising out of a shallow valley like something conjured from the grass itself. Naomi leaned forward, studying it. Small didn't begin to cover it. The house was a single-story structure made of rough-hewn logs, with a slanted roof and one narrow window facing the road. Beside it stood a barn, larger than the house, actually, and a chicken coop that looked like it might blow over in a strong wind. A corral made of split rails held the 2 horses Caleb had mentioned. Beyond that, nothing but grass and sky. It was the loneliest place Naomi had ever seen. "Home," Caleb said. He didn't sound proud or apologetic, just stating a fact. He pulled the wagon to a stop near the house and climbed down. This time, he came around to her side and offered his hand. Naomi took it and felt the strength in his grip as he helped her down. His hands were rough, scarred in places. Working hands, like hers. "I'll get your trunks," he said. "You can go inside." Naomi walked to the door, unpainted wood, hanging slightly crooked on its hinges, and pushed it open. The inside was worse than the outside. One room served as everything: kitchen, dining area, sitting space. A narrow doorway led to what she assumed was the bedroom. The floor was bare wood, scuffed and stained. The walls were unadorned. A single table stood in the center of the room with two mismatched chairs. In the corner, a cast-iron stove squatted like a sullen animal. There were no curtains, no rugs, no pictures or decorations of any kind. It looked like a place where someone existed, but didn't live. Naomi heard Caleb behind her carrying the first trunk. He set it down near the wall without comment, then went back for the second. She stood in the middle of the room, trying to absorb it all. "Bedroom's through there," Caleb said when he returned with the other trunk. "I cleared out a space for your things." She looked at the doorway, then back at him. Where will you sleep?" Something flickered in his eyes. "Barn, for now." "The barn?" "Until we're married proper. Wouldn't be right otherwise." He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "Reverend comes through once a month. He'll be here in 3 days. We can... then." "Oh." Naomi's face grew warm. She'd known, of course, that there would be a wedding, but somehow it hadn't felt real until this moment. 3 days, if that's acceptable. Yes. Yes. An awkward silence fell. Caleb cleared his throat. "I need to see to the horses. There's some beans in the cupboard if you're hungry. Coffee, too." He was halfway to the door when Naomi found her voice. "Caleb?" He stopped, turned. "Thank you," she said. "For sleeping in the barn. That was decent of you." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he gave a short nod and walked out. Naomi stood alone in her new home, listening to his footsteps fade away. The first night was hard, not because of the house, though the bed was narrow and the mattress lumpy, not because of the silence, though that was suffocating in its completeness. No, it was hard because Naomi couldn't stop thinking. She lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling she couldn't see, and wondered if she'd made the worst mistake of her life. Caleb hadn't come back to the house after tending the horses. She'd waited for an hour, then 2, before finally eating a cold dinner of beans and stale bread. She'd washed her plate in the bucket of water by the door, unpacked one of her trunks, and tried to make the bedroom feel less like a cell. It hadn't worked. Now, as the wind rattled the loose window frame and something small skittered across the roof, Naomi felt the full weight of her isolation. She was 10 miles from the nearest town, 2,000 miles from anyone who knew her name, and married or about to be to a man who looked at her like she was a problem he hadn't anticipated. "You're not what I expected." She'd heard those words before, from her aunt, when Naomi kept growing taller and broader instead of slimming down like a proper young lady. From the boys at church, who'd snickered when she'd outgrown the pews. From her own mother, who'd sighed every time she had to let out another dress. But she'd hoped, that out here, in a place where strength mattered more than appearance, things might be different. Maybe she'd been wrong. Naomi rolled onto her side, pulling the thin blanket up to her chin. Tomorrow she'd figure out what to do. Tomorrow she'd decide if she could really stay in this empty house with this silent man. Tonight, she just needed to get through the darkness. She woke to the sound of chopping. For a confused moment, she didn't know where she was. Then it came rushing back. Montana, the ranch, Caleb. She sat up, wincing as her back protested. The window showed gray pre-dawn light. The chopping continued, rhythmic and steady. Naomi dressed quickly, splashing cold water on her face from the basin. When she stepped outside, she found Caleb at the woodpile, splitting logs with mechanical precision. He'd already accumulated an impressive stack. He didn't notice her at first. She watched him work, noting the way he moved. Efficient, controlled, no wasted motion. His shirt was already damp with sweat despite the cool morning air. "You're up early," she said. He paused mid-swing, then lowered the axe. "Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't. I'm used to early mornings." She glanced at the sky. "What time is it?" "Little past 5. She nodded. Back at the feed store, she'd started work at 6. This wasn't much different. "Is there coffee?" "Made some. Should still be warm." "Thank you." She started to turn back toward the house, then stopped. Caleb? I can cook if you'd like. For breakfast. He studied her. You don't have to. I know, but I'm going to be hungry anyway. Seems silly to cook for one when there's two of us. Something softened in his face. All right. Thank you. What do you have for cooking? Eggs, some salt pork, cornmeal. That'll work. She went back inside, found the coffee pot on the stove still warm, and poured herself a cup. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint, but she'd had worse. While she drank it, she took inventory of the kitchen. It was depressing. The cupboard held the bare minimum: flour, cornmeal, salt, a few tins of beans, coffee, and a jar of what looked like bacon grease. No sugar, no spices, no butter or cheese, or anything that might make food taste like more than just fuel. The cookware was similarly sparse: one cast iron skillet, one pot, a battered tin plate, and a single cup. It was like Caleb had equipped the kitchen for survival and nothing more. Well, she could work with that. Naomi built up the fire in the stove, then went outside to the chicken coop. The chickens, 5 of them, scrawny and suspicious, regarded her with beady eyes. She spoke to them softly as she collected eggs, the way her mother had taught her. 4 eggs. Not bad. When she returned to the house, Caleb was washing up at the pump. She watched him splash water over his face and neck, saw the way his shirt clung to his shoulders. He was leaner than she'd realized, strong, but not bulky, the kind of strength that came from constant work. He caught her looking and straightened. She quickly turned away, her face heating. Inside, she cooked. It wasn't fancy: fried eggs, salt pork, and cornmeal mush, but it was hot and filling. She set 2 plates on the table just as Caleb came in. He stopped in the doorway, staring at the table like he'd never seen such a thing. Something wrong? Naomi asked. No, just haven't had anyone cook for me in a while. How long? Since Ma died. 10 months. 10 months of cooking for himself, eating alone, living in this empty house. Naomi's heart clenched despite herself. Well, she said, trying to keep her voice light. Sit, before it gets cold. They ate in silence. Naomi watched him from the corner of her eye, noting the way he ate, quickly, efficiently, like it was just another task to complete. When he was finished, he looked at his empty plate with something like surprise. That was good, he said. Thank you. You're welcome. He stood, carrying his plate to the wash bucket. I need to check the fences today. North pasture, probably be gone most of the morning. Is there anything you need me to do while you're gone? He paused. Can you handle chickens? Yes. They need feeding, water too. Coop could use cleaning if you're willing. I can do that. And there's laundry. He gestured vaguely toward a basket in the corner, overflowing with dirty clothes. If you want, no obligation. Naomi looked at the basket, then back at him. Caleb, I came here to help, not to sit idle. I know, just wanted to make sure. I'm sure. He nodded, grabbed his hat from a peg by the door, and left. Naomi stood in the kitchen, listening to the sound of hoofbeats fading into the distance. Then she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. What? The chicken coop was worse than she'd expected. The smell alone made her eyes water. It was clear that cleaning was not something Caleb prioritized. She found a shovel in the barn and set about mucking out the old straw, trying to breathe through her mouth. The chickens protested loudly, flapping and squawking around her legs. One of them pecked at her boot. Stop that, Naomi said firmly. I'm helping you, you ungrateful creature. The chicken pecked again. By the time she finished, her back ached and her dress was filthy. But the coop was clean. The chickens had fresh water and feed, and the eggs were safely collected. Small victories. Next came the laundry. She found a large pot, filled it with water from the pump, and set it to boil on the stove. While she waited, she sorted through Caleb's clothes, shirts with missing buttons, pants with torn hems, socks worn so thin they were practically transparent. The man needed someone to take care of him. That much was obvious. She washed the clothes in batches, scrubbing stains against the washboard until her knuckles were raw. Then she hung them on a line she'd rigged between the house and the barn, using rope she'd found in the storage lean-to. As she worked, she became aware of the landscape around her, the way the grass moved in waves when the wind picked up, the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead, the vastness of the sky, so blue it made her chest ache. It was beautiful and terrifying, and lonely beyond measure. She was hanging the last shirt when she heard hoofbeats. Caleb appeared over the rise, riding the larger of the two horses. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders. Something was wrong. He dismounted near the barn, then stood for a moment, just staring at the clothesline, at the clean clothes flapping in the breeze, at the evidence of her work. Naomi wiped her hands on her apron and walked over. "Did you find the fence problem?" "Yeah." His voice was tight. Mountain lion took down one of the calves, tore right through the wire. "Oh, I'm sorry." "Happens." He still wasn't looking at her. His gaze was fixed on the clothes. "You didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to." "Why?" The question caught her off guard. Because it needed doing? Most women would have complained about the coop, the laundry, all of it. "I'm not most women." Finally, he looked at her, really looked at her, his gray eyes searching her face. "No," he said quietly, "you're not." Something passed between them. Naomi wasn't sure what it was, understanding maybe, or the beginning of it. But before she could respond, Caleb turned away. "I need to bury the calf," he said. "Then I'll fix that fence." "Do you need help?" "No, I've got it." He led his horse toward the barn, his shoulders still tight with whatever he was carrying. Naomi watched him go, feeling that same flutter in her chest. 3 more days until the wedding. 3 more days of this careful distance, this awkward dance of trying to figure each other out. She wondered if it would get easier. She wondered if it would get harder. That evening, Caleb came to the house for dinner. Naomi had made beans and cornbread, nothing fancy, but substantial. They ate in their now familiar silence, the only sounds the scrape of spoons against tin plates. Halfway through the meal, Caleb spoke. "The Reverend will be here day after tomorrow." "I know. We should probably talk about expectations." Naomi set down her spoon. "All right." He shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't expect. That is, I know this isn't a normal marriage. You're here because I needed help and you needed—" He stopped. "I won't force anything. You'll have your space, your privacy." "I appreciate that. But I do need help with the ranch. The work's hard. Some of it's heavy." "I can handle hard work." "I know you can. I saw the coop." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Those chickens have never been so clean." Despite herself, Naomi smiled back. They were disgusting. They were. Another silence. But this one was softer. "Caleb," Naomi said carefully, "when you said I wasn't what you expected, what did you expect?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Someone who'd give up, who'd see this place and get back on that stagecoach." "I'm not a quitter." "No, you're not." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "But you should know, this life, it's harder than most people can handle. The winters are brutal. We're 10 miles from town. If something goes wrong, you're on your own until someone can get here. And the work—" He shook his head. "It never ends, never gets easier." "Are you trying to scare me away?" "No, just want you to understand what you're signing on for." Naomi met his gaze steadily. "I understand. I've worked hard all my life, Caleb. This won't be different. Just a different kind of hard. It's lonely. I've been lonely before." Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Like he understood exactly what she meant. "All right," he said finally. "Day after tomorrow, then." "Day after tomorrow." He stood, carried his plate to the wash bucket. At the door, he paused. "Thank you for dinner." "You're welcome." After he left, Naomi sat alone at the table, listening to the silence. But this time, it didn't feel quite so oppressive. Maybe she really could do this. Maybe. The next day, Caleb took her to see the cattle. "You'll need to know where they are," he said, "in case something happens." They rode together, Naomi on the smaller horse, a mare named Bess who seemed unbothered by having a new rider. The cattle were scattered across the north pasture, grazing peacefully in the morning sun. 40 head, Caleb said. Down one now, thanks to that lion. But they're good stock, hardy. Naomi studied the animals. She knew nothing about cattle, but she kept that to herself. What do I need to know about them? They're smarter than they look, and meaner if you're not careful. That one, he pointed to a large bull with scarred shoulders. That's Brutus. Don't ever turn your back on him. Noted. They rode along the fence line, Caleb pointing out weak spots, places where the wire needed replacing. Naomi tried to absorb everything, knowing she'd need this information eventually. As they rode, she became aware of how comfortable he was out here. The tension he carried at the house seemed to melt away on the open prairie. He sat easy in the saddle, his movements fluid and natural. You grew up here? She asked. In Montana? Nebraska. Came here with my parents when I was 12. What brought you? Land was cheap. Ma wanted a fresh start after my father died. He was quiet for a moment. She worked herself to death on this place. But she loved it. I'm sorry. About your mother. He nodded. She would have liked you. Ma had no patience for quitters. It was maybe the nicest thing he'd said to her. Naomi felt warmth spread through her chest. They were heading back when Naomi's horse shied suddenly. She grabbed the saddle horn, staying seated, but her heart hammered. Easy, Caleb said. He was off his horse in an instant, moving to grab Bess's bridle. Easy, girl. The mare settled, snorting. Caleb looked up at Naomi. You all right? Yes. What was that? Snake, probably. She's scared of them. He studied Naomi with what might have been approval. You stayed on. That's good. I told you, I don't quit. This time his smile was real. Brief, but real. They rode back to the ranch in companionable quiet. When they dismounted, Caleb said, Tomorrow's the wedding. I know. You still sure? Naomi looked at him, this quiet, damaged man who'd offered her a chance at something new, who'd slept in a barn to preserve her honor, who smiled so rarely that when he did, it felt like a gift. I'm sure, she said. And she was. The Reverend arrived at noon on a Thursday, riding a tired-looking mule and carrying a worn Bible in his saddlebag. Naomi had been watching the road since morning, her stomach twisted into knots. She'd put on her best dress, dark green cotton with a white collar, and attempted to tame her hair into something presentable. The result was mediocre at best, but it would have to do. Caleb had washed up at the pump and changed into a clean shirt. She'd noticed his hands shaking slightly as he buttoned it, and the observation had steadied her own nerves somehow. He was nervous too. Reverend Mitchell, Caleb said, stepping forward to shake the man's hand. Appreciate you making the trip. Wouldn't miss it. Mitchell was older than Naomi had expected, maybe 60, with wire-rimmed spectacles and a gentle smile. And this must be Miss Carter. Yes, sir. Naomi's voice came out smaller than she intended. Well, shall we get started then? I've got 2 more stops before nightfall. That was it. No ceremony, no fuss, just business. They stood in front of the house, the 3 of them, with nothing but grass and sky as witnesses. Mitchell opened his Bible and began to read, his voice carrying the practiced rhythm of someone who'd performed this ritual 100 times before. Naomi barely heard the words. She was too focused on trying to keep her hands from shaking, on the way Caleb stood perfectly still beside her, on the bizarre reality that in a few minutes she would be married to a man she'd known for 3 days. Do you, Caleb Ward, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. His voice was steady. And do you, Naomi Carter, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? This was it. Last chance to run. Last chance to say no. To get back on that stagecoach and return to Ohio and admit that she'd failed. But she'd meant what she told Caleb. She didn't quit. I do. Mitchell smiled. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you man and wife. He closed the Bible. You may kiss the bride if you'd like. Caleb went very still. Naomi held her breath. He turned to face her, his gray eyes unreadable. Then very carefully, he leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead. It was brief, chaste, Nothing like a real wedding kiss. But his hand found hers and squeezed, just once, and that felt more intimate than any kiss could have been. "Congratulations," Mitchell said, already moving toward his mule. "I'll file the paperwork next time I'm in Helena. You two take care now." And just like that, he was gone, leaving Naomi and Caleb standing in the yard, married. Naomi looked down at their joined hands, then up at Caleb's face. "Well," she said, "I suppose that's that." "Suppose so." He released her hand, stepping back. "I should check on the north fence. That wire won't hold much longer." "Now? You're going now." Work doesn't stop for weddings. But there was something in his voice, not quite apologetic, but close. "Unless you need something." What she needed was for him to stay, to talk to her, to acknowledge that something significant had just happened. But she couldn't say that, not when he was already turning toward the barn. "No," she said. "I'm fine." He paused, looking back at her. "There's stew from last night, if you're hungry." "Thank you." He nodded and walked away, leaving her standing alone in her wedding dress with nothing to show for the ceremony but a brief kiss on the forehead and a squeeze of her hand. Naomi went inside and changed out of the green dress. Then she heated up the stew and ate it by herself at the table, listening to the silence. This was her life now. This was what she'd chosen. She told herself it was enough. Work. The days after the wedding blurred together into a relentless cycle of work. Naomi had thought she understood hard labor. 6 years in the feed store had taught her about sore muscles and long hours. But this was different. This was dawn to dusk, every day, with no rest and no end in sight. She fed the chickens, collected eggs, hauled water from the pump. She learned to milk the cow Caleb had traded for 2 weeks after the wedding, a temperamental beast named Rosie who kicked if you looked at her wrong. She scrubbed floors, mended clothes, cooked every meal from ingredients so basic they barely qualified as food. And the heat. The merciless, suffocating heat that made every movement feel like wading through molasses. Naomi had always been aware of her size, but out here it became impossible to ignore. Every task took more effort, required more energy. Her dresses, already tight, grew tighter as she sweated through them. Her boots chafed. Her back ached constantly. And Caleb watched. Not obviously. He never stared or made comments. But she caught him looking sometimes, his expression unreadable, and she knew what he was thinking, that she was too slow, too clumsy, too much. 2 weeks after the wedding, she was carrying water buckets from the pump to the garden when her foot caught on a rock. She stumbled, sloshing water down her front, and barely managed to stay upright. "Careful." Caleb was suddenly there, steadying the buckets. "Let me take those." "I can manage." "I know you can, but you don't have to." He took the buckets from her hands before she could protest. "Come on, I'll show you an easier way." He led her to the garden, a pathetic square of dirt where a few struggling vegetables fought to survive, and set the buckets down. Then he demonstrated a different grip, one that distributed the weight more evenly. "Like this," he said. "Uses your legs more, saves your back." Naomi copied his stance, feeling the difference immediately. "Oh, that is better. Ma taught me that. She was..." He paused. "She was built like you, strong, but the work was hard on her joints. She figured out tricks." It was the most personal thing he'd said to her since the wedding. Naomi didn't know how to respond. "Thank you," she said finally, "for telling me." He nodded and walked away, leaving her standing in the garden with buckets that suddenly felt a little lighter. 3 weeks in, Naomi burned dinner. She'd been distracted, exhausted from a day spent mucking out the barn, and she'd left the beans on the stove too long. The smell of scorched food filled the house, acrid and unmistakable. "Damn it!" She grabbed the pot with a rag, burning her hand anyway, and yanked it off the stove. Black sludge coated the bottom. The beans were ruined. Caleb appeared in the doorway. "Everything all right?" "I burned it. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. It's just beans." He crossed to the cupboard, pulled out the cornmeal. "We'll have mush instead." "You don't have to..." "Naomi." He looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression softened. "You're exhausted. Sit down." "I should clean the pot." "It'll keep. Sit." She sat, too tired to argue. Caleb mixed cornmeal and water with quick practice movements, then poured it into the clean skillet. They ate the mush in silence, and it was terrible, bland and gluey. But Naomi was too hungry to care. "I'm sorry," she said again when they'd finished. "Stop apologizing. You work harder than anyone I've ever seen." He hesitated, then added, "You don't have to prove anything." "Don't I?" The words came out sharper than she'd intended. Caleb's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I see the way you look at me sometimes, like you're waiting for me to fail." "That's not—" He stopped, his jaw tight. "That's not what I'm doing." "Then what are you doing?" "Trying to figure out how you haven't given up yet." His voice was low, almost angry. "Most people would have. This place, this life. It breaks people. But you just keep going." Naomi stared at him. "You thought I'd break? I thought you'd realize you made a mistake, that you'd leave. Where would I go? I spent everything I had to get here. There are ways. You could—" "I could what? Crawl back to Ohio and admit I failed? Work as someone's maid, someone's charity case?" She stood, her own anger rising to match his. "I came here because I had nothing left to lose, because no one wanted me there either. At least here, I'm useful." Caleb stood too, his chair scraping loudly. "You think I don't want you here?" "I think you don't know what to do with me." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. They stood on opposite sides of the table, both breathing hard, both wound too tight from weeks of careful politeness and unspoken frustration. "You're right," Caleb said finally. "I don't know what to do with you. But it's not because of your size or your strength or any of that." "Then what?" "Because you scare me." Naomi blinked. "What?" "You came here with nothing. No guarantees, no safety net, just faith that it would work out. That kind of courage—" He shook his head. "I don't know what to do with that." She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process the raw honesty in his voice. "I'm not brave," she said quietly. "I'm just stubborn." Maybe that's the same thing. They stood there, the ruined pot of beans between them like evidence of their imperfection. Then Caleb moved around the table and did something unexpected. He took her burned hand, the one she'd hurt grabbing the pot, and examined it carefully. The skin was red, already blistering. "We should put something on this," he said. "It's fine." "It's not fine." He went to the shelf, found a tin of salve, and returned. His touch was gentle as he applied it, his calloused fingers careful against her damaged skin. "You need to take care of yourself." "I don't have time to take care of myself." "Make time." He looked up at her, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Concern. Real concern. "I need you healthy. For the work. For—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider. "Yes. For the work." But Naomi wondered if that was really what he'd been about to say. The next morning, she woke to find wildflowers on the kitchen table. They were simple, prairie grass and a few white blooms she didn't recognize, arranged in a chipped tin cup. No note, no explanation. But Caleb was already gone, out checking the cattle, and Naomi knew who'd left them. She touched one of the petals, feeling something loosen in her chest. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was barely a gesture at all, but it meant something. He was trying, and so was she. 4 weeks in, Caleb started teaching her about the cattle. "You need to know this," he said, leading her out to the pasture on a cool morning that hinted at autumn to come. "In case something happens to me." "Nothing's going to happen to you." "Probably not, but probably isn't good enough out here." He showed her how to spot a sick animal, the way it stood apart from the herd, the dullness in its eyes, how to check for injuries, for signs of predators, how to move cattle without spooking them. "Don't ever run at them," he said, "and don't ever corner them. They're prey animals. They'll panic." Naomi absorbed everything, taking mental notes. Caleb was a good teacher, patient, thorough. He didn't talk down to her or assume she couldn't understand. When they approached Brutus, the scarred bull, Caleb put his arm out, stopping her. "Remember what I said. Don't turn your back." I won't. They circled around the bull, keeping their distance. Brutus watched them with dark, calculating eyes. Why keep him if he's dangerous? Naomi asked. Because he's good stock. Strong bloodlines. Caleb's mouth quirked. Sometimes the difficult ones are worth the trouble. Naomi glanced at him, wondering if he was still talking about the bull. That's it. The breakthrough came on a Wednesday, 5 weeks after the wedding. Naomi was in the barn, trying to move a hay bale, when she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. A low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. She froze, her heart hammering. Slowly, she turned her head. The mountain lion was crouched in the doorway, blocking her exit. It was massive, easily over 100 pounds, with yellow eyes that fixed on her with predatory focus. Naomi's mind went blank with terror. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she knew that was the worst thing she could do. Caleb had told her that. Predators chase what runs. The lion took a step forward. Naomi took a step back, her hand fumbling for something, anything, to use as a weapon. Her fingers closed around a pitchfork handle. Naomi? Caleb's voice, distant, from the house. You in the barn? The lion's ears swiveled toward the sound, its muscles bunched. Caleb! Naomi's voice came out as a strangled shout. Lion! Everything happened fast after that. The lion lunged. Naomi swung the pitchfork with all her strength, catching it across the shoulder. The animal yowled, more surprised than hurt, and twisted midair. Then Caleb was there, rifle in hand, his face stark white. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. The lion jerked, stumbled, and bolted out of the barn, leaving a trail of blood. Silence fell, broken only by Naomi's ragged breathing and the ringing in her ears. Did it get you? Caleb was beside her, his hands on her arms, her face checking for injuries. Are you hurt? No, I'm fine. You're shaking. She was. Her whole body was trembling so hard her teeth chattered. The pitchfork slipped from her nerveless fingers, clattering to the floor. Caleb pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her. You're all right. You're safe. Naomi buried her face in his shoulder and let herself shake. She could feel his heart pounding against her cheek, as fast as her own. His shirt smelled like sweat and hay, and something indefinably him. I couldn't reach the rifle, she said against his chest. It was on the wall and I couldn't. You did exactly right. You didn't run. You fought back. His voice was rough. That took guts. I was terrified. That's what guts means, being scared and doing it anyway. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped around each other in the dusty barn. Then Caleb pulled back, his hands on her shoulders, and looked her in the eye. I need to track it, he said. Make sure it doesn't come back. Can you get to the house? Lock the door? Yes. Rifle's on the wall. You know how to shoot? My uncle taught me. Basic. Good enough. Anything comes near the house, you shoot first and ask questions later. Understand? She nodded. Naomi. He waited until she met his eyes. You did good today. Real good. Then he was gone, moving with swift purpose, following the blood trail out into the afternoon sun. Naomi made it to the house on shaking legs, locked the door, and took down the rifle. Then she sat at the table with the gun across her lap and waited. Caleb returned 2 hours later. The lion was dead, he reported. He'd tracked it half a mile before finding it collapsed in a ravine. No threat now. That night, they ate dinner in unusual silence. Not the comfortable kind they'd developed, but something heavier, charged. You could have been killed, Caleb said finally, setting down his fork. So could you. Every time you go out there. That's different. Why? Because I'm a woman? Because... He stopped, frustrated. Because I know what I'm doing out there. I grew up with this. And I'm learning. You're teaching me. Not fast enough. If that lion had... His hands clenched into fists on the table. I can't lose you. The words hung in the air between them. Can't lose your help, you mean? Naomi said carefully. No. Caleb looked at her, his gray eyes intense. I can't lose you. Naomi's breath caught. Caleb, I know what we agreed. I know this was supposed to be practical. Just an arrangement. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being that. For me, anyway. He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. You can pretend you didn't hear that if you want. We can go back to how things were. Naomi stood too, her heart racing. And if I don't want to pretend? He turned to face her. What do you want? I want... She took a breath, gathering her courage. I want to know why you leave flowers on the table. Because I don't know how to talk to you. Not about the things that matter. Then show me. She moved closer, closing the distance between them. Show me what you can't say. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then Caleb reached out, his rough hand cupping her face with surprising gentleness. You're not what I expected, he said quietly, but you're everything I didn't know I needed. When he kissed her, really kissed her, not the chaste peck from the wedding, it was like something fundamental shifted in the world. His mouth was warm, slightly hesitant at first, then sure. Naomi's hands found his shoulders, steadying herself, and she kissed him back with all the pent-up emotion of the past 5 weeks. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. I'm not good at this, he said. At feelings, at talking about them. Good thing I'm stubborn then. He laughed. Actually laughed, a sound she'd never heard from him before. Yeah, good thing. That night, for the first time since the wedding, Caleb didn't sleep in the barn. 8. The next morning, Naomi woke to the sound of hammering. She dressed quickly and went outside to find Caleb on the roof, replacing damaged shingles. What are you doing? She called up. Fixing the leak. Should have done it weeks ago. Need help? You know how to patch a roof? No, but I can learn. He grinned down at her, an actual grin, transforming his normally serious face. Come on up then, ladder's on the side. The work was hot, difficult, and occasionally terrifying. The roof was steeper than it looked, and Naomi's fear of heights didn't help. But Caleb was patient, guiding her through each step, never making her feel foolish for not knowing. As they worked, he talked. Really talked. More than he had in all the previous weeks combined. About his mother, who'd been tough as nails and twice as stubborn. About his father, who died when Caleb was young. About the dreams he'd had for the ranch, before loneliness and exhaustion had ground them down to simple survival. I wanted to build it bigger, he said, driving in a nail with practiced precision. More cattle, better barn, maybe hire help so it wasn't all on me. What stopped you? Lost heart, I guess. Seemed pointless, doing it all alone. Naomi positioned the next shingle, holding it steady while he nailed. You're not alone anymore. He looked at her, his expression soft. No, I'm not. They finished the roof as the sun climbed toward noon, both of them sweating and filthy. When they climbed down, Caleb caught her at the bottom of the ladder, his hands on her waist. Thank you, he said. For what? You did most of the work. For staying. For not giving up on this place. On me. Naomi touched his face, feeling the stubble rough against her palm. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? I promise. Pat. The change in their relationship was subtle but profound. Caleb still went out to work the ranch, and Naomi still handled the house and chickens and garden. But now there was ease between them, conversation, laughter. He taught her to ride better, spending an hour each evening working with her in the corral. She taught him that food could be more than just fuel, experimenting with the limited ingredients to create meals that actually tasted good. They developed rhythms, routines, small intimacies that made the house feel less like a prison and more like a home. 6 weeks after the wedding, Samuel Pruitt came by with supplies from town. He took one look at Naomi and Caleb standing together in the yard, her hand resting casually on his arm, his body angled toward hers, and smiled. Well now, he said, looks like married life agrees with you both. It does, Caleb said, and the way he looked at Naomi when he said it made her cheeks warm. After Pruitt left, Naomi helped Caleb unload the supplies. Flour, sugar, coffee, a precious tin of peaches, luxuries they'd been doing without. You didn't have to spend so much, she said. Wanted to. You deserve nice things. I don't need nice things. I know, but I want you to have them anyway. He pulled out one final item, a length of fabric in deep blue, the color of the Montana sky. Thought you could make a new dress. If you wanted. Naomi ran her fingers over the fabric, feeling the quality of it. This wasn't cheap cotton. This was something special. Caleb, this is too much. It's not enough. Not for what you do around here. He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. I know the work is hard. I know I'm not easy to live with, but you make it better. All of it. You make everything better. She set down the fabric and turned to face him fully. You're easier to live with than you think. I'm not. I'm moody and silent, and I don't know how to... He gestured vaguely, frustrated. How to what? How to show you what you mean to me? Naomi took his hand, lacing their fingers together. You do show me. Every day. In 100 small ways. It's not enough. It's more than enough. He pulled her close, and she went willingly, resting her head against his chest. Through his shirt, she could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong. I'm going to build you a better house, he said into her hair, with real windows and a proper floor. And we'll expand the ranch, get more cattle, make something worth having. We already have something worth having. What's that? This. Us. His arms tightened around her. Yeah, we do. We do. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, they sat together on the porch, a luxury they'd built the week before, just 2 chairs and a small platform. But it felt like a palace. Naomi worked on mending while Caleb cleaned his rifle, and the silence between them was the comfortable kind, full of shared understanding. Naomi? Caleb said after a while. I love you. She looked up from her sewing, her heart suddenly full. He was watching her with those gray eyes, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. I know I'm supposed to say it different, he continued, romantic-like, with flowers or something, but I'm no good at that, and I wanted you to know. Naomi set down her mending and moved to his chair, settling onto his lap. He adjusted automatically, making room for her, his arms wrapping around her waist. I love you too, she said, even though you're terrible at romance and you snore and you never remember to close the cupboard. I don't snore. You absolutely snore. He laughed, that rare, wonderful sound, and kissed her soundly. When they broke apart, Naomi rested her forehead against his. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me. Not just my size or what I can do, but actually seeing me. Thank you for staying, he countered, for giving me a chance to see you. They sat like that as the sun set, wrapped around each other, watching the prairie grass turn gold in the fading light. And for the first time since arriving in Montana, Naomi felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt like she belonged. The peace lasted exactly 3 weeks. Naomi was hanging laundry when she noticed the sky. It had been clear that morning, that brilliant Montana blue that seemed to stretch forever. But now, dark clouds gathered on the western horizon, moving fast, their undersides an ugly greenish gray that made her stomach clench. Caleb? She called toward the barn. He emerged, took one look at the sky, and his face went tight. Get inside, now. What is it? Storm coming. Bad one. He was already moving, his long strides eating up the distance to the corral. I need to get the cattle to shelter. I can help achieve. No. Inside. Lock the doors, stay away from windows. He was throwing a saddle on his horse, his movements jerky with urgency. If it gets bad, get in the root cellar. Caleb, you can't go out in this. Those cattle are our livelihood. I lose them. We lose everything. He swung up into the saddle. I'll be back as soon as I can. Please be careful. But he looked down at her, and something in his expression softened. Always am. Then he was gone, galloping toward the north pasture where the herd grazed. Naomi stood in the yard, watching him disappear over the rise. The wind had picked up, hot and strange, carrying the smell of rain and something else. Something electric. The first drops hit as she ran for the house. Within minutes, the sky opened up. Rain came down in sheets so thick Naomi could barely see the barn from the window. Thunder cracked overhead, making the whole house shake. Lightning turned the world white, then dark, then white again. She tried to stay calm, tried to focus on productive things. She moved away from the windows like Caleb had said, gathered candles in case the lanterns blew out, made sure the root cellar door was clear. But her eyes kept going to that window, straining to see any sign of movement through the rain. An hour passed, then 2. The storm showed no sign of letting up. If anything, it was getting worse. The wind screamed around the corners of the house, rattling the roof they'd just repaired. Something metal clanged repeatedly in the yard, probably the wash bucket she'd left out. Naomi paced, her worry building with each passing minute. Where was he? How long did it take to move 40 head of cattle? Should she go look for him? No. That was stupid. She'd just get lost in the storm, become another problem for him to solve. But the alternative, sitting here doing nothing while he was out there in this, felt impossible. 3 hours. The light was fading, turning the storm even darker. Naomi lit the lanterns, then immediately moved them away from the windows. Her hands were shaking. "Come on, Caleb," she whispered. "Come home." As if in answer, lightning struck close. So close the thunder was instantaneous, a crack that sounded like the world splitting open. Naomi jumped, her heart hammering. Through the window, she saw flames leap up from the barn. No! 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 She grabbed a bucket and ran outside. The rain hit her like a wall, soaking her instantly. Wind tore at her clothes, her hair. She could barely see 3 feet in front of her. The barn wasn't fully ablaze yet, the rain was too heavy for that. But fire licked at one corner where the lightning had struck. If it spread to the hay inside, if it reached the storage lean-to where they kept winter supplies. Naomi filled the bucket at the pump, her fingers numb and clumsy. She threw water at the flames, but the wind scattered it before it hit. She tried again. Again. Her arms burned, her lungs ached from breathing the wet air. She didn't know how long she fought that fire. Time became meaningless, measured only in buckets hauled and thrown. The rain helped, eventually drowning the flames. But by then, Naomi was beyond exhausted. She stood in the mud, gasping, staring at the charred corner of the barn. The rain was lessening now, becoming just a steady downpour instead of a deluge. Naomi turned back toward the house and froze. In the distance, barely visible through the rain, something was moving, something big. Her first thought was Caleb finally coming home, but the shape was wrong. Too low, too wide. And then she heard it, a sound like nothing she'd ever experienced. A rumbling, growing thunder that had nothing to do with the storm. The cattle. They appeared over the rise like a wave, a massive surge of animals driven mad by the storm. 40 head had become something more. They must have broken through a fence somewhere, mixing with a neighbor's herd, or maybe picking up strays. There had to be hundreds of them, their eyes rolling white with panic, stampeding straight toward the ranch, straight toward her. Naomi's mind went blank with terror. She couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stand there and watch death thunder toward her. Then she saw him, Caleb, riding hard along the edge of the herd, trying to turn them. His horse was lathered, stumbling, clearly spent. But he kept pushing, kept trying to redirect the stampede away from the buildings. It wasn't working. The cattle were too panicked, too far gone. They were going to crash right through the ranch, destroying everything in their path, including Caleb. Naomi watched in horror as his horse went down. One moment Caleb was in the saddle, the next he was on the ground, rolling, trying to get clear. The cattle were almost on top of him. She didn't remember deciding to move. She just ran, screaming his name, waving her arms like she could somehow stop hundreds of stampeding animals through sheer force of will. "Caleb, get up! Get up!" He was on his feet, running, but the cattle were faster. Naomi saw him stumble, saw him go down again, and something inside her broke. She couldn't reach him, couldn't save him, couldn't do anything but watch the man she loved disappear under a wall of churning hooves and horns. "No!" The scream tore out of her, raw and primal. Her legs gave out, and she fell into the mud, her hands clutching at nothing as the herd swept past in a chaos of noise and motion. And then they were gone, disappearing into the storm, leaving only silence and devastation behind. Naomi knelt in the mud, shaking so hard her teeth rattled. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the image of Caleb going down, of him being trampled, of him. A hand touched her shoulder. She screamed and spun around, and there he was, alive, bleeding from a dozen places, his face ghost white, one arm hanging at an odd angle, but alive. "You're—" Naomi couldn't get the words out. "You're alive." "Barely." His voice was rough, strained. "There's a gully. I rolled into it. They went over me." He swayed on his feet. "Naomi, I need—" He collapsed. Naomi caught him, or tried to. He was too heavy, too tall, and they both went down in the mud together. But she didn't let go. She wrapped her arms around him, feeling his chest rise and fall, reassuring herself that he was breathing. "Don't you dare die," she said fiercely. "Don't you dare." Not planning on it, but his eyes were glassy, unfocused, cold. He was going into shock. Naomi knew that much from helping her uncle after accidents at the feed store. She needed to get him inside, needed to get him warm and dry and check his injuries. But he was easily 50 pounds heavier than her, and dead weight besides. She tried to lift him, failed, tried again, got him partway up before her back screamed in protest, and she had to let him down. "Come on," she muttered. "Come on, Naomi, you can do this." She couldn't. Not by lifting him. But maybe she could drag him. She got behind him, hooking her arms under his shoulders, and pulled. He groaned in pain, and she felt sick, but she didn't stop. Inch by inch, she hauled him through the mud toward the house. Her feet slipped, her muscles burned, and somewhere along the way she started crying without realizing it. It took forever. By the time she got him to the porch, her arms were numb, and she was sobbing for breath. But she didn't stop. She dragged him up the steps, through the door, into the main room. Then she collapsed beside him, her vision swimming with exhaustion. "Not done yet," she told herself. "Get up. Help him." She forced herself to move. First, she got him out of his wet clothes, trying not to hurt him more than necessary. His left arm was definitely broken. She could see the swelling, the unnatural angle. He had cuts and bruises everywhere, and a gash on his head that was still bleeding. Naomi worked with shaking hands, cleaning wounds, binding his arm as best she could with strips torn from a sheet. She'd never done anything like this before, but she didn't have a choice. The nearest doctor was 10 miles away in Ridgestone, and with the storm still raging, there was no way to get him there. She was on her own. By the time she'd done everything she could, the storm had finally broken. Rain still fell, but gently now. The thunder was distant. Caleb lay on the floor wrapped in every blanket they owned, his breathing shallow but steady. Naomi sat beside him, too exhausted to move. Her hands were covered in his blood. Her dress was torn and filthy. She'd never been so tired in her life. But he was alive. That was all that mattered. Caleb woke at dawn. Naomi knew because she was watching him, had been watching him all night from her position on the floor beside him. She hadn't slept, too afraid that if she closed her eyes, he'd stop breathing. His eyes opened slowly, focusing on the ceiling, then on her face. "Hey," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Hey yourself." She touched his face, needing to confirm he was real. "How do you feel?" "Like I got trampled by 100 cattle. Closer to 200, I think." She tried to smile, but it came out shaky. "You scared me." "Sorry." He tried to sit up, winced, and fell back. "Arm's broken." "I know. I said it as best I could, but you need a real doctor. Can't get to town in this." He gestured vaguely toward the window, where mud and debris coated everything. "Roads will be washed out. Then the doctor will have to come here." "Naomi, I'll ride to town. I'll bring him back." Caleb grabbed her hand with his good arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "You can't ride 10 miles alone, and you definitely can't ride in this weather. Watch me." "No." His eyes were fierce despite the pain. "I won't let you risk it." "You don't get to decide that." "The hell I don't. You're my wife." "Exactly, which means I get to take care of you." She pulled her hand free, standing up. "I'm going to town, Caleb. You can argue all you want, but I'm going." She expected him to keep fighting. Instead, he just looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "You dragged me inside," he said quietly. "Didn't you?" "Yes." That's not easy. I'm not a small man." "I managed." "You always manage." He shook his head slightly. "I should have known better than to think you'd stay put while I was hurt." "You should have." She softened, kneeling beside him again. I can do this, Caleb. I know the way. Bess is steady. I'll be fine. If anything happens to you, it won't. I'm too stubborn to die. That got a weak smile from him. Yeah, you are. She leaned down and kissed him, gentle, mindful of his injuries. When she pulled back, his eyes were wet. Come back to me, he said. Always. The ride to Ridgestone was the longest 10 miles of Naomi's life. The roads were worse than she'd feared. Mud sucked at Bess's hooves, making every step treacherous. Fallen branches blocked the path in places, forcing Naomi to detour through open prairie where the ground was marginally better. The sky was still heavy with clouds, threatening more rain. Every dark shadow made Naomi's heart jump, expecting another mountain lion, another disaster. But she kept going, kept Bess moving forward, because Caleb needed help and she was the only one who could get it. She'd been riding for maybe an hour when she heard hoofbeats behind her. Naomi turned in the saddle, her hand going automatically to the rifle Caleb had insisted she bring. But it wasn't a threat. It was Samuel Pruitt, riding toward her on his old mare. Mrs. Ward, he called, what are you doing out here? Caleb's hurt. I need the doctor. Pruitt drew up beside her, his weathered face creased with concern. How bad? Broken arm? Cuts and bruises? Maybe worse, I don't know. The words tumbled out. The cattle stampeded during the storm. He got caught. I dragged him inside, but I don't know if I did everything right. Easy now. Take a breath. Pruitt's voice was calm, grounding. I'm heading to town myself. I'll ride ahead. Send Doc Morris out to your place. You turn around, go home to Caleb. Relief made Naomi dizzy. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's what neighbors do. He started to ride off, then paused. Mrs. Ward, you're braver than most men I know. Then he was gone, his horse kicking up mud as he raced toward Ridgestone. Naomi turned Bess around and headed home. Doc Morris arrived 3 hours later, a thin man with gentle hands and sharp eyes. He examined Caleb thoroughly while Naomi hovered, unable to sit still. Well, Morris said finally, you did a fair job with the arm. It's set properly, though I'll need to splint it better. The head wound isn't as bad as it looks. Scalp bleeds heavy. Always seems worse than it is. Rest and time. That's what he needs now. He'll be all right? Naomi asked. Should be. You got him inside fast, kept him warm. That probably saved his life. Morris started packing his bag. You have medical training, Mrs. Ward? No, just common sense. Sometimes that's better. He handed her a small bottle. Laudanum. For the pain. Not too much, just enough to help him sleep. And keep that arm immobilized for at least 6 weeks. 6 weeks? Caleb protested from the bed where they'd finally moved him. I can't. You can and you will, Morris said firmly, unless you want it to heal crooked and never work right again. After Morris left, promising to check back in a few days, Naomi sat on the edge of the bed and looked at Caleb. 6 weeks, she said. I heard him. You know what that means. That you'll be doing most of the work around here, which you already were. He tried to sound casual, but Naomi heard the worry underneath. I can handle it. Naomi, you can't run this ranch alone. It's too much, even for... He stopped. Even for someone like me? Her voice was sharp. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Caleb sighed, wincing as the movement pulled at his injuries. I meant it's too much for anyone. The cattle are scattered. The barn's damaged. We lost fence in the stampede, and now I'm useless for the next month and a half. You're not useless. I can't even dress myself. So I'll help you dress. I'll do the work that needs doing. We'll figure it out. And if you can't? If it's too much? Naomi stood, anger rising in her chest. Why do you keep waiting for me to fail? I survived that journey here. I survived learning this life. I survived you being distant and cold. I survived a mountain lion and a stampede and dragging your unconscious body through the mud. What exactly do I need to do to prove I'm not going to break? I don't think you'll break, Caleb said quietly. I think I'll break you. This place, this life, it's too hard. I should never have brought you here. You didn't bring me here. I chose to come. Because you had nowhere else to go. Is that what you think? That I'm only here because I had no other options? She was shaking now, not from exhaustion, but from fury. I stayed because I wanted to. I stayed because I love you. I stayed because this is my home now, my life, my choice. Caleb stared at her, his gray eyes wide. I'm not your mother, Naomi continued. I won't work myself to death trying to prove I deserve to be here, but I'm also not going to give up the first time things get hard. So you can either trust me to handle this, or you can lie there and worry yourself sick. Your choice. The silence that followed was heavy. Then Caleb spoke, his voice rough. I'm sorry. For what? For underestimating you. For thinking you needed protecting when what you needed was for me to trust you. He held out his good hand. Help me sit up? Naomi took his hand and helped him into a sitting position, propping pillows behind him. When he was settled, he didn't let go of her hand. I'm scared, he admitted, of losing you, of you realizing this isn't worth it, of waking up one day and finding you gone. I'm not going anywhere. You said that before, and I'll keep saying it until you believe me. She squeezed his hand. I'm here, Caleb. I'm staying. Storm or stampede or anything else this land throws at us. I'm staying. He pulled her closer, wrapping his good arm around her, and Naomi felt him shake. Not from pain, she realized, from something deeper, from finally letting himself believe. I don't deserve you, he whispered into her hair. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. That got a weak laugh from him. They sat like that as the afternoon light slanted through the window, holding each other in the wreckage of their home, and somehow it felt like enough. The next few days were brutal. With Caleb confined to bed, everything fell to Naomi. She fed the chickens, milked Rosie, tended the garden. She rode out to check on the cattle, or what was left of them. The stampede had scattered the herd across miles of prairie. She found some of them easily, others took hours of searching. She counted 42 head in total. Some were theirs, marked with Caleb's brand. Others belonged to neighbors. A few were unmarked, strays that had joined the stampede. All of them needed to be rounded up, sorted, returned to their proper pastures. Naomi had never worked with cattle alone before, but she remembered what Caleb had taught her: patience, not force. Steady movements, calm voice. Don't panic them. It took 3 days to gather the herd. 3 days of riding from dawn to dusk, of muscles screaming and hands blistered from the reins. Twice she fell off Bess trying to head off a steer. Once she got pinned against a fence by Brutus, who seemed to take personal offense at being herded by a woman. But she did it. Got them all into the south pasture where the fence was still intact. When she rode back to the house that third evening, so tired she could barely stay in the saddle, Caleb was standing on the porch. He'd propped himself against the railing, his broken arm in the makeshift sling, watching her approach. You got them all, he said. Not a question. Most of them. Lost about 6, best I can tell. 6 out of 42. That's damn good for a stampede. Naomi dismounted, nearly falling when her legs wouldn't hold her weight. Caleb moved to help, but she waved him off. You're supposed to be in bed. Couldn't stay there another minute. I'm going crazy. He studied her face. You look dead on your feet. I'm fine. Liar. Okay, I'm exhausted. Happy? No, but impressed. He reached out with his good hand, touching her cheek. You did it. 3 days, all alone, and you did it. Had a good teacher. Teacher can't make you brave. You did that yourself. Naomi leaned into his touch, letting herself feel the exhaustion now that the work was done. I need to unsaddle Bess. I'll help. Caleb. I can do it one-handed, and I'm going crazy sitting around being useless. They walked to the barn together, moving slowly, both of them damaged in different ways. Naomi showed Caleb how to unbuckle the saddle using one hand, how to work around his injury. It took longer than normal, but they managed. As they worked, Caleb talked about the repairs that needed doing. The fence had to be rebuilt in 3 different places. The barn needed more than just the lightning damage fixed. The whole northwest corner was rotting. The chicken coop roof had blown half off in the storm. I can't do any of it, he said, frustration thick in his voice. Can't hammer, can't lift, can't do a damn thing. Then tell me how. I'll do it. Naomi, you can't. Watch me. Over the next 2 weeks, she proved it. With Caleb directing from a chair he'd dragged into the yard, Naomi rebuilt fence. She'd never done it before, never driven a post or strung wire. But she learned. Her hands blistered, bled, calloused over. The posts weren't perfectly straight, the wire wasn't perfectly tight. But it held. She patched the barn with boards they had stored in the lean-to. She fixed the chicken coop roof, hammering in new shingles while the chickens squawked their disapproval below. And slowly, the ranch stopped looking like a disaster site and started looking like a home again. Samuel Pruitt came by every few days, bringing news from town and checking on Caleb's recovery. His wife Martha came too, bringing food and gossip and a practical kindness that Naomi hadn't realized she was starving for. "You're the talk of the town," Martha said one afternoon, helping Naomi hang curtains she'd sewn from the blue fabric Caleb had bought. "Riding out alone in that storm. Doctoring Caleb yourself, working the ranch while he recovers." "I'm just doing what needs doing." Most women would have given up by now, gone back east. "I'm not most women," Martha smiled. "No, dear, you certainly aren't." Other neighbors started showing up too. Men who'd come to help with the heavier work, women who brought supplies and stayed to help with canning, preserving the vegetables from the garden before they spoiled. They didn't make a fuss about it, just showed up and worked alongside Naomi like it was the most natural thing in the world. One evening, after everyone had gone, Caleb found Naomi sitting on the porch, staring out at the prairie. "You all right?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Just thinking." "About?" "How different this is from what I expected. When I came here, I thought I'd be alone. Just you and me, isolated. And instead, there's this whole community. People who care, who help without being asked." She looked at him. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Didn't think it mattered. Figured you'd see for yourself." "It matters. It matters a lot." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the prairie. The sky was clear tonight, unmarred by storm clouds. Stars were already starting to appear. "Your arm healing all right?" Naomi asked. "Doc says so. Still hurts like hell, but it's getting better." Caleb flexed his fingers, testing the mobility. "Another month before I can use it properly." "Good thing I'm getting better at fence building, then." "You're getting better at everything." He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "I was wrong, before. When I said this place would break you." "I remember." "It didn't. If anything, it made you stronger." He reached over and took her hand. "You made us stronger." Naomi felt her throat tighten with emotion. "We're not done yet. There's still so much work to do before winter." "We'll manage. We always do. Together." "Together," he agreed. As darkness fell and the stars filled the sky, they sat hand in hand on the porch they'd built together, in front of the house they were slowly making into a home. The work was hard, the future uncertain. But for the first time since arriving in Montana, Naomi felt not just accepted but valued, not just needed but wanted, and that made all the difference. The morning Caleb's splint came off, he stood at the pump, flexing his hand like he'd never seen it before. "Feels weak," he said, opening and closing his fist. "Strange." Doc Morris said it would take time to build the strength back. Naomi watched from the porch, arms crossed. "You're not supposed to overdo it." "I know what he said." "And you're going to ignore him anyway." Caleb shot her a look, half guilty, half defiant. "I've been sitting around for 6 weeks. There's work that needs doing." "There's always work that needs doing. That doesn't mean you have to hurt yourself doing it." He walked over to where she stood, his movements careful. The arm was healed, but she could see him favoring it still. "I'm not made of glass." "I know that, but you're also not invincible, no matter what you think." She softened, reaching up to touch his face. "Just be smart about it, please." "I'll try." He caught her hand, kissed her palm. "But I need to pull my weight again. Can't keep letting you do everything." "You haven't been letting me do anything. I've been doing it because it needs done." She paused. "And because I can." Something shifted in his expression. Pride, maybe. Or respect. "Yeah, you can." They worked together that day, slowly rebuilding their partnership. Caleb started with lighter tasks, mending tack, organizing the barn, checking fence lines while Naomi handled the heavy lifting. It wasn't perfect. He pushed too hard and his arm ached by evening, but it was progress. That night, as they prepared for bed, Caleb stopped in the doorway and just looked at her. "What?" Naomi asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Nothing, just thinking about how different things are now." "Different how?" "When you first got here, this house felt empty, even with 2 people in it. Now it feels like home." Naomi's throat tightened. "Yeah, it does." He crossed to her, pulled her close with both arms this time. "I never thanked you properly, for taking care of the ranch while I was laid up, for taking care of me." "You don't need to thank me." "I do. You could have—" He stopped, choosing his words carefully. "You could have used it as an excuse to leave, to say it was too much, but you didn't." "Where would I go, Caleb? This is my home. You're my home." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, like he was trying to tell her everything he couldn't put into words. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were bright. "I don't deserve you," he said. "We've had this conversation. Stop saying that." "It's true, though." "Then I guess you'll just have to work very hard to keep deserving me." She smiled, "Starting with not overworking that arm tomorrow." "Yes, ma'am." But the next morning brought a complication neither of them had expected. Naomi woke feeling wrong. Not sick exactly, but off. Her stomach churned uneasily as she dressed, and the smell of coffee brewing made her gag. "You all right?" Caleb asked when she came into the kitchen, one hand pressed to her stomach. "Fine, just coffee smells strange today. Smells the same as always to me." He poured himself a cup, then stopped. "You look pale." "I'm fine," she insisted, but the room tilted slightly. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. Caleb was beside her in an instant. "Sit down." "I don't need to—" "Sit down." She sat, more because her legs felt wobbly than because he'd ordered it. Caleb knelt in front of her, his gray eyes worried. "What's wrong? Are you sick?" "I don't know, I just feel strange." Another wave of nausea hit and she swallowed hard. "Maybe something I ate." "We ate the same thing last night." "Then maybe I'm just tired." But over the next few days, the strangeness persisted. Naomi would wake feeling queasy, though it usually passed by mid-morning. Her breasts were tender, her emotions raw. She cried at stupid things. A broken egg, a shirt that wouldn't button right, the way the sunset looked. Caleb grew increasingly concerned, hovering until Naomi wanted to scream. Finally, Martha Pruitt came by with preserves and took one look at Naomi before pulling her aside. "How long?" Martha asked quietly. "How long what?" "Since your last monthly." Naomi opened her mouth to answer, then stopped. When was her last monthly? She tried to think back, but everything had been so chaotic with the storm and Caleb's injury and managing the ranch. She'd been too busy to pay attention to. "Oh," she said faintly. "Oh, indeed," Martha smiled. "I'd say congratulations are in order. It might not be. Honey, I've had 5 children. I know the signs. You're pregnant." The word hung in the air between them. Pregnant. Naomi sat down hard on the porch steps, her mind reeling. "Are you all right?" Martha asked, sitting beside her. "I don't know. I didn't think. We weren't trying to—" She stopped, feeling stupid. Of course it was possible. She and Caleb had been sharing a bed for months now, but somehow she'd never considered this outcome. "Does Caleb know?" "No, I didn't know until just now." Martha patted her hand. "He'll be thrilled." "Will he?" Naomi looked at the older woman. "We can barely manage the ranch as it is. Adding a baby will be hard, yes, but it'll also be a blessing. You'll see." After Martha left, Naomi sat on the porch for a long time, trying to process. A baby. She was going to have a baby. In this rough house, in this hard land, with winter coming and so much work still to do. She should have been terrified. Part of her was. But another part, a part she hadn't known existed, felt something else entirely. Joy. Caleb found her there as the sun was setting. He'd been checking the north pasture and his shirt was dusty, his face tired, but he smiled when he saw her. Hey, you feeling better? Yes. No, I don't know. She took a breath. Caleb, we need to talk. The smile disappeared. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. At least, I don't think it is. She patted the step beside her. Sit. He sat, and she could feel the tension radiating from him. Waiting. I'm pregnant, Naomi said. Just like that. No lead up, no gentle explanation. Caleb went very still. You're what? Pregnant. Going to have a baby. Martha confirmed it today. He stared at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. You're sure? Pretty sure. All the signs are there, apparently. More silence. Naomi's stomach knotted. She couldn't read his expression, couldn't tell if he was happy or horrified or angry. Say something, she said finally. I'm going to be a father. Yes. We're having a baby. That's generally what pregnant means. He turned to her and his face was doing something complicated. Not quite smiling, not quite crying, somewhere in between. We're having a baby. Then he was pulling her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. She felt him shaking and realized he was laughing, actually laughing, with a joy she'd never heard from him before. We're having a baby, he said again, like he couldn't quite believe it. You're happy? Naomi asked, relief flooding through her. Happy? He pulled back to look at her. Naomi, I'm terrified. But yeah, I'm happy. Are you? I think so. It's a lot to take in. It is. He touched her stomach gently, reverently. There's really a baby in there. Apparently. How far along? I don't know exactly. 2 months, maybe? 3? He did the math in his head. So you were pregnant during the stampede, was she? When you dragged me inside, when you were working the ranch. I didn't know. I wouldn't have Oh, she stopped. Actually, I probably would have done it anyway, but I didn't know. Caleb's expression shifted to something fierce. No more heavy lifting. No more fence building or barn repairs or, Caleb, I'm serious. You could hurt yourself, hurt the baby. Women have been having babies while doing hard work since the beginning of time. I'm not made of glass any more than you are. That's different. How is it different? Because, he struggled for words, because you're carrying our child. I need to protect you. You can protect me by not wrapping me in cotton and treating me like I'm helpless. She took his hand, placed it on her stomach. I'm strong, Caleb, strong enough to do what needs doing. Trust me. He looked torn. I do trust you, but that doesn't mean I won't worry. Then worry, but don't try to stop me from living my life. They sat together as darkness fell, both processing this new reality. A baby. Their baby. Coming sometime in the spring if Naomi's calculations were right. We need to prepare, Caleb said finally. The house is too small. We'll need another room at least. And supplies. Diapers, clothes, blankets, and, Caleb, we have time. Not that much time. Winter's coming, and after that, we'll figure it out. We always do. He nodded, but she could see his mind already racing, planning. That night, he sketched rough plans for an addition to the house, a small bedroom for the baby with a window facing east to catch the morning light. We'll start as soon as the weather holds, he said, showing her the drawings. Samuel can help. Maybe some of the other men from town. We can't afford to pay them. Won't need to. That's how it works out here. They'll help us build, and when they need help, we'll return the favor. Naomi studied the plans. They were simple but solid, like everything Caleb did. It's perfect. You think so? I do. He rolled up the papers carefully. I want to give you both everything. A proper house, a safe place, enough. Caleb. She turned his face toward hers. We have enough. We have each other. Everything else we'll figure out as we go. What if I mess it up? What if I'm a terrible father? The vulnerability in his voice made her chest ache. You won't be. You're patient. You're kind. You work harder than anyone I know. You'll be a good father. How do you know? Because I know you. She kissed him softly. And because I won't let you be anything less. That made him smile. Stubborn woman. You knew that when you married me. Best decision I ever made. Over the next few weeks, preparations began in earnest. Caleb threw himself into building the addition with an intensity that worried Naomi. He worked from dawn until long after dark, his healing arm be damned. "You're going to hurt yourself again," she said one evening, finding him still hammering by lamplight. "I'm fine." "You're exhausted. Come inside." "Just need to finish this section." "Caleb Ward, if you don't come inside right now, I'm going to drag you in myself. And in my condition, that probably isn't wise." He stopped mid-swing, looking at her. Then he set down the hammer. "You're right. Sorry." Inside, she made him sit while she examined his arm. It was swollen, the skin hot to the touch. "You've been overdoing it. There's just so much to do before the baby comes. The baby won't care if the addition is finished, but it will care if its father is too injured to hold it." Caleb sagged in the chair. "I just want everything to be ready." "It will be, but you can't do it all yourself, and you can't do it all in one day." She fetched ice wrapped in cloth, pressed it to his swollen arm. "Let the neighbors help." That's what they offered. "I hate asking for help." "I know, but sometimes that's what we have to do." True to her word, she sent word to Samuel Pruitt. Within 2 days, half a dozen men showed up with tools and lumber, ready to work. They framed the addition in a week, working alongside Caleb, who grudgingly accepted their help. The women came too, bringing food and baby clothes and advice that ranged from helpful to bizarre. Martha Pruitt became Naomi's anchor, explaining what to expect, what was normal, what required concern. "You're carrying well," Martha said one afternoon, studying Naomi's growing belly. "Strong baby, I can tell." "How can you tell?" "The way you're shaped. Trust me, 5 children teaches you things." She smiled. "Have you thought about names?" "Not really. It still doesn't feel real yet." "It will. Wait until you feel it move." That happened 2 weeks later. Naomi was hanging laundry when she felt it. A flutter, like butterfly wings against the inside of her stomach. She froze, one hand going to her belly. There it was again, stronger this time. "Caleb!" she called, her voice shaking. He came running from the barn, saw her clutching her stomach, and went pale. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Here." She grabbed his hand, placed it on her belly. "Wait for it." They stood there in the yard, surrounded by wet laundry, waiting. Then it happened again, and Caleb's eyes went wide. "Was that?" "The baby. It's moving." His face did that complicated thing again, joy and fear and wonder all mixed together. "It's really in there." "I told you that." "I know, but this is—" He shook his head, unable to find words. "This is real. Very real." He knelt in front of her, pressing his ear to her stomach like he could hear the baby's thoughts. Naomi ran her fingers through his hair, feeling something shift and settle in her chest. This was her family now. This man and this baby and this hard, beautiful land. This was what she'd been searching for all along, even when she didn't know it. The addition was finished by mid-October, just before the first snow. It was small but well-built, with a real floor and a window that actually closed properly. Naomi spent a day cleaning it, then another arranging the few baby things they'd accumulated. A cradle Samuel had made. Blankets Martha had brought. A few tiny clothes that seemed impossibly small to fit an actual human. Caleb found her sitting in the middle of the empty room, surrounded by baby things, crying. "What's wrong?" He knelt beside her, alarmed. "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." She wiped at her eyes furiously. "Look at this room. Look at all this. 2 months ago, it was just us barely surviving. Now there's going to be a baby. Is that bad? No. It's terrifying and wonderful, and I don't know if I'm ready. You're the strongest person I know. If anyone's ready, it's you. What if I'm not? What if I can't do this?" Caleb pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried. "Then we'll figure it out together, same as everything else." "What if I'm a terrible mother?" "You won't be." "How do you know?" "Because you care enough to worry about it. That's half the battle right there." He kissed the top of her head. "And because I've seen you with the chickens." That startled a laugh out of her. "The chickens?" "You talk to them, every morning, like they're people." "That's different." Is it? You take care of things. It's what you do. He pulled back to look at her. This baby is lucky to have you. We don't even know if it's a boy or girl. Doesn't matter. Either way, they're getting the best mother they could ask for. Naomi leaned into him, letting his certainty shore up her fear. Outside, the first snowflakes were starting to fall, dusting the prairie white. Winter came hard that year. By November, the cold was brutal, the wind relentless. Naomi's pregnancy made everything more difficult. She tired easily, her balance was off, and the cold seemed to cut through her no matter how many layers she wore. But she kept working. Not the heavy labor, Caleb and the neighbors handled that now, but the daily tasks that kept them fed and warm. Cooking, mending, managing the chickens who stubbornly kept laying through the cold. One morning in early December, she woke to find Caleb already gone. She dressed clumsily, her growing belly making everything awkward, and went to find him. He was in the barn with Brutus. The bull had gotten sick overnight, and now he stood in the corner of his pen, sides heaving, foam at his mouth. Caleb was trying to examine him, but Brutus was having none of it, swinging his massive head threateningly. Easy, Caleb murmured. Easy, boy. I'm trying to help. What's wrong with him? Naomi called from the doorway. Don't know. He's been fine, and now this. Caleb dodged another head swing. But I can't get close enough to check properly. Let me try. Naomi, no. He's dangerous on a good day, and right now, I know, but he's also sick and scared. She moved slowly into the barn. Animals can sense fear. And right now, you're afraid. Damn right I'm afraid. That's 2,000 pounds of mean. Just let me try. Naomi approached the pen slowly, talking in a low, steady voice. The same voice she used with the chickens, with Bess, with every animal on the ranch. Brutus watched her with rolling eyes, but he didn't charge. That's right, she murmured. Nobody's going to hurt you. We just want to help. She reached the pen, climbed carefully over the rail. Behind her, she heard Caleb's sharp intake of breath, but she didn't look back. All her attention was on Brutus. The bull snorted, pawed the ground, but he didn't move. Naomi kept talking, kept moving slowly closer. When she was near enough to touch him, she extended her hand, letting him smell her. He tossed his head, but allowed it. Then she saw the problem. Wire, caught around his neck, cutting into the skin. He must have gotten tangled in a broken section of fence, thrashed until he freed himself, but not before the wire embedded. Caleb, she said quietly. Wire cutters. Slowly. He handed them over the rail. Naomi took them, positioned herself carefully. This is going to hurt, she told Brutus, but then it'll feel better. I promise. She cut. Brutus bellowed and jerked, but Naomi had anticipated it, already moving back. The wire fell away, blood seeping from where it had cut in. Now, let's clean that, Naomi said, retrieving the salve they used for wounds. She worked quickly, efficiently, while Brutus stood trembling but still. When she was done, she backed away slowly. Brutus watched her, then lowered his massive head and snorted. If Naomi didn't know better, she'd say it sounded almost grateful. She climbed back over the rail, and Caleb caught her, pulling her against him. Don't ever do that again, he said into her hair. He needed help. He could have killed you, killed both of you. But he didn't. She pulled back to look at him. Sometimes you have to risk it, Caleb, for the things that matter. You matter. The baby matters. More than any bull. I know, but Brutus matters too. He's part of our herd, part of what we're building here. Caleb shook his head, but she could see the pride in his eyes. Stubborn, impossible woman. You married me anyway. Best mistake I ever made. I thought it was the best decision you ever made. That too. They stood in the barn, holding each other while Brutus settled in his pen, his breathing already easier. Outside, snow began to fall again, but inside was warm, was home. Spring can't come soon enough, Caleb said. Why's that? Because I want to meet this baby, want to see who they take after. Hopefully me, for their sake. I hope they have your stubbornness, your strength. He touched her belly gently. Your heart. Naomi felt tears prick her eyes again. Damn these emotions. And your patience, your steadiness, your courage, your kindness. Deal. They stayed like that until the cold drove them back to the house, already planning, already dreaming of the spring to come, and the life they would bring into this hard, beautiful world. Winter held on longer than anyone expected. By March, when the baby was due, the ground was still frozen, and snow fell in sporadic bursts that turned the world white and silent. Naomi had grown huge. There was no other word for it. Her belly preceded her into rooms, made simple tasks nearly impossible. She couldn't see her feet, couldn't bend over, couldn't sleep more than an hour at a time before her back screamed or the baby kicked her awake. "I'm never doing this again," she announced one morning, struggling to pull on her boots. Caleb, watching from the doorway, tried not to smile. "You said that yesterday. I mean it this time." "You said that too." She glared at him, then gave up on the boots. "Fine. You do it." He knelt in front of her, working the boots onto her swollen feet with gentle hands. "How are you feeling?" "Like I swallowed a watermelon and it's trying to escape through my ribs." "That bad?" "Worse." She touched her belly, feeling the baby shift and turn. "I just want it out. I want to meet whoever this is. And I want my body back. Soon." "You've been saying that for weeks." "And I'll keep saying it until I'm right." He finished with the boots, looked up at her. "Martha's coming by today to check on you." "I know. She came yesterday too, and the day before." Naomi softened. "I appreciate it. I do. But if one more person pats my belly and tells me I'm carrying high or low or sideways or whatever, I'm going to lose my mind." Caleb stood, kissed her forehead. "I'll run interference." My hero. But when Martha arrived that afternoon, her expression was serious enough that both Naomi and Caleb went quiet. "What's wrong?" Naomi asked. "Nothing's wrong, exactly, but I wanted to talk to you both about what to expect." Martha settled into a chair, her weathered hands folded in her lap. "Naomi, this is your first baby. First babies can be difficult." "Difficult how?" "Long labor, for one thing. Could be hours, could be a full day or more. And it's going to hurt. No way around that." "I figured as much." "There's also a chance of complications. Bleeding, the baby being positioned wrong, cord problems." Martha's voice was gentle, but firm. "I've seen it go bad, Naomi. I won't lie to you. It can go bad." The room fell silent. Caleb had gone very still beside Naomi. "What are you saying?" he asked quietly. "I'm saying you need to be prepared, and you need to decide now. If something goes wrong, if it comes down to a choice." Martha looked at them both. "You need to tell me who to save, Naomi or the baby." Naomi felt the blood drain from her face. "That's not... You can't ask." "I can, and I am. Because in the moment, there won't be time to discuss it. I need to know now." Caleb stood abruptly, walked to the window. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clenched. "Caleb?" Naomi's voice was small. He turned, and the look on his face broke her heart. "There's no choice. You save Naomi." "But the baby..." "No." His voice was hard, final. "I won't lose you. I can't lose you. The baby..." His voice cracked. "We can try again, but there's only one you." Martha nodded. "All right then. That's settled." But Naomi shook her head. "No, it's not settled. You can't just decide that without asking me. I'm your husband, and it's my body, my baby." She stood, facing him. "If it comes down to it, you save the baby." "Naomi, no, listen to me." She crossed to him, took his hands. "I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But I didn't survive everything we've been through just to let our child die because you're afraid of being alone. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. But that baby is innocent. It deserves a chance. So do you. I've had my chance. I've lived. I've loved. I've built something here with you." She pressed his hand to her belly. "This is our future, Caleb. Our legacy. You can't ask me to choose myself over that." He was crying now, tears running down his face. "I can't do this without you." "You won't have to. I'm going to be fine. But we're both going to be fine." She didn't know if she believed it, but she said it anyway. "But if I'm not, if something happens, I need to know you'll choose our baby. Promise me." I can't. Promise me, Caleb. The silence stretched. Martha sat quietly in her chair, letting them work it out. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting past the window. Finally, Caleb pulled Naomi against his chest, holding her so tight it almost hurt. I promise, he whispered. But you better not make me keep it. I won't. I'm too stubborn to die. You better be. Martha left shortly after, promising to come back the next day. When she was gone, Caleb and Naomi sat together by the fire, neither speaking. There was nothing left to say. 3 days later, just before dawn, Naomi woke to wetness and pain. She lay still for a moment, trying to understand what was happening. Then another pain hit, sharper this time, and she knew. Caleb, she said, shaking his shoulder. Caleb, wake up. He came awake instantly. What's wrong? The baby. It's coming. He was out of bed in seconds, pulling on pants, fumbling with the lantern. How long have you been having pains? This is the second one. The first woke me up. I need to get Martha. He was already heading for the door. Caleb, wait! But he was gone, racing out into the pre-dawn darkness. Naomi heard hoofbeats fading into the distance and found herself alone. Another pain hit, stronger than the last. She gripped the edge of the bed, breathing through it like Martha had taught her. When it passed, she stood carefully, changed into a clean nightgown, and gathered the supplies they'd prepared. Towels, blankets, a basin of water. Then she waited. The pains came faster, harder. By the time Martha arrived with Caleb, Naomi was pacing the room, unable to sit still. How far apart? Martha asked, all business now. 5 minutes, maybe? I'm not sure. Let me check. Martha examined her quickly, efficiently. You're moving along fast for a first baby. That's good. Doesn't feel good. No, it wouldn't. Martha started setting up, directing Caleb to boil water, to gather more towels. This could still take hours. Try to rest between pains. But resting was impossible. The pains came in waves, each one stealing her breath, making her whole body clench. Naomi walked, squatted, tried different positions. Nothing helped. Nothing made it better. Time became meaningless. Hours passed in a blur of pain and exhaustion. At some point, Martha sent Caleb out of the room because Naomi was screaming and it was making him crazy. She heard him pacing outside the door, heard the low murmur of voices. Samuel had come, and some of the women from town. Push now, Martha commanded. Naomi pushed. Nothing happened except more pain. Again. She pushed until spots danced in her vision, until she thought she might pass out. Still nothing. The baby's stuck, Martha said quietly. Head's too big or positioned wrong. I need to... Do whatever you have to do, Naomi gasped. Just get it out. What followed was agony. Martha's hands reaching inside her, trying to turn the baby. Naomi screamed, couldn't help it, heard Caleb shouting something outside the door. Samuel's voice holding him back. Almost there, Martha said. One more push. Give me everything you've got. Naomi bore down with the last of her strength, felt something give, felt a rush of movement, and then a cry. High and angry and absolutely perfect. It's a girl, Martha announced, holding up a red, squalling infant. A big, healthy girl. Naomi collapsed back against the pillows, shaking. A girl. She had a daughter. Martha worked quickly, cleaning the baby, cutting the cord. Then she placed the tiny bundle in Naomi's arms. The baby was perfect. Dark hair plastered to her head, eyes squeezed shut, fists waving in outrage at being born. She was also huge, at least 9 pounds, Martha estimated, with strong lungs and a temper to match. She's beautiful, Naomi whispered. She's got a set of pipes, that's for sure. Martha smiled. Can I let the father in now? He's about to break down the door. Yes, please. Caleb came in like a storm, his face pale, his eyes wild. Then he saw Naomi holding the baby and stopped short. Are you? We're fine. Both of us. Naomi held out the baby. Meet your daughter. He crossed to the bed on shaking legs, sat carefully on the edge. When Naomi placed the baby in his arms, his whole face transformed. Wonder, joy, fear, all of it playing across his features. "She's so small," he whispered. "She's 9 pounds. That's not small." "She's perfect." "Yes, she is." They sat together, the three of them, while outside the sun rose on a new day. The snow had stopped, and through the window, Naomi could see the first hints of spring green pushing through the white. "What should we name her?" Caleb asked. They'd discussed names before, but nothing had felt right. Now, looking at her daughter's face, Naomi knew. "Rose," she said. "After your mother." Caleb's eyes filled with tears. "You sure?" "I'm sure. She was strong and stubborn, and she loved this land, just like our daughter will be." "Rose Ward." He tested it out. "Yeah, that's perfect." Martha left them alone after a while, promising to check back later. The other women drifted away too, leaving the new family to themselves. Naomi tried to nurse, fumbling through it awkwardly while Caleb watched with a mixture of fascination and terror. Rose latched on eventually, her tiny mouth working with determination. "She's strong," Caleb observed. "She'd have to be. She's our daughter." He touched Rose's head gently, his rough fingers impossibly tender. "I was so scared. When you were screaming, when I couldn't help—" "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. You just gave me the greatest gift imaginable." He looked at Naomi. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not dying. For keeping your promise. Told you I was too stubborn." "Thank God for that." They stayed in bed for most of that day, learning their daughter. How she liked to be held, what her different cries meant, the way she'd grip their fingers with surprising strength. She was alert, watching them with dark eyes that seemed to take in everything. "She's going to be trouble," Caleb predicted. "Definitely. Smart, though. Look at how she watches everything. She gets that from you. And the stubbornness from you. Poor thing doesn't stand a chance." But they were smiling as they said it, exhausted and happy and utterly in love. Over the next few weeks, they settled into a new rhythm. Nights were hard. Rose woke every few hours, hungry and loud. Days were a blur of feeding, changing, trying to get work done while also caring for an infant. Naomi had thought she knew what exhaustion was before. She'd been wrong, but there were moments of perfect joy, too. The first time Rose smiled, probably gas, but they counted it anyway. The way she'd quiet when Caleb sang to her in his rough off-key voice. How she'd grip Naomi's finger while nursing, like she was afraid of letting go. Samuel and Martha came by often, bringing food and help. Other neighbors, too, creating a rotation so Naomi and Caleb were never completely alone. The women taught Naomi the tricks they'd learned with their own children. The men helped Caleb catch up on ranch work that had fallen behind. "This is what community means," Martha said one afternoon, holding Rose while Naomi finally got some sleep. "We take care of our own." And slowly, Naomi realized that's what she'd become. One of their own. Not the outsider who'd arrived on a stagecoach. Not the big woman who didn't fit. Just Naomi, wife, mother, rancher, part of the fabric of this place. Spring came fully in April, turning the prairie green and gold. Naomi carried Rose outside, showing her the world she'd been born into. "That's the barn," she said, pointing. "And that's where the chickens live. And over there, that's the pasture where your father keeps the cattle." Rose blinked at the sunlight, unimpressed. "You'll understand eventually," Naomi promised. "This is your home, this land, these people. They're your legacy." Caleb found them there, sitting in the grass with Rose on a blanket between them. He'd been checking fence but had knocked off early, unable to stay away. "How's my girls?" he asked, settling beside them. "We're good. Rose has decided she likes the outside. Takes after her mother." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter discover her fingers. She was growing fast, already filling out, losing that newborn fragility. "I've been thinking," Caleb said after a while, "about expanding the herd, maybe getting some sheep too. Diversify." "That's ambitious. We've got help now. And Rose is going to need—" He stopped. "I want to build something bigger. For her. For us." "We already have something." "I know, but it could be more." He looked at her. "We could be more." Naomi understood what he meant. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just getting by, but building something that would last. Something Rose could inherit and be proud of. Then let's do it, she said. All of it. Over the next year, they did exactly that. The herd grew. They added sheep, then chickens beyond the original 5. Caleb built a proper barn, tearing down the old one and starting fresh. Neighbors helped, and in return, Caleb helped them. Slowly, the ranch transformed from a struggling operation to something prosperous. Naomi transformed too. Motherhood had changed her in ways she couldn't have predicted. She was softer in some ways, harder in others. More patient with Rose's constant demands, less patient with anyone who suggested she couldn't handle both a baby and a ranch. And the community's perception changed as well. The women who'd initially been wary now came to her for advice on everything from stubborn livestock to difficult births. The men respected her opinion on cattle prices and weather patterns. She'd proven herself in the only way that mattered out here, through endurance. Rose's first birthday came on a crisp March morning. They didn't do anything fancy, just a cake Martha had helped Naomi bake and a few gifts from neighbors. But it felt monumental anyway. "Can you believe it's been a year?" Naomi asked, watching Rose demolish her cake with enthusiastic hands. "Feels like yesterday, and like forever." Caleb wiped frosting off his daughter's face. "Look at her. She's already walking, trying to talk. Soon she'll be running the ranch." Knowing her, probably, Rose looked up at her father and grinned, showing tiny teeth. Then she held up her frosting-covered hands, demanding to be picked up. "Oh no," Caleb said. "You're a mess." Rose just laughed and grabbed for him anyway. Later that night, after Rose was asleep, Naomi and Caleb sat on their porch watching the stars. The addition had been expanded twice now. They had a proper bedroom, a nursery for Rose, even a small sitting room. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs. "Do you ever think about before?" Caleb asked. "When you first got here?" "Sometimes. Feels like a different life." "You were so determined. Even when I was being an ass, you just kept going." "You weren't that bad." "I was terrible, cold, distant, didn't know how to talk to you." He took her hand. "I almost lost you before I even had you." "But you didn't, and I didn't give up on you." "Why not? You could have left, gone back to Ohio, started over somewhere else." Naomi thought about that. About the frightened woman who'd stepped off that stagecoach, expecting rejection and finding it. About how easy it would have been to quit, to run, to hide from the hard work of building a life. "Because," she said slowly, "I realized something important. I'd spent my whole life trying to make myself smaller, trying to fit into spaces that were too narrow, trying to be what other people wanted. Coming here, staying here. That was the first time I'd ever just taken up space without apologizing for it." "You've never needed to apologize." "I know that now. But it took this place, and you, and all of this." She gestured at the ranch, the stars, everything. "It took all of this to teach me." "What did it teach you?" "That belonging isn't about fitting in. It's about finding the place that fits you." She looked at him. "This is my place. You're my place. Rose is my place. I don't need to be smaller or quieter or different. I just need to be here." Caleb pulled her close, kissed her temple. "I'm glad you stayed." "Me too." They sat in silence, comfortable and complete. Inside, Rose slept peacefully. Around them, the prairie stretched into darkness, vast and wild and home. Naomi had crossed 2,000 miles expecting rejection. She'd found it, initially, but she'd also found something more important. She'd found that strength wasn't about changing yourself to fit the world. It was about finding the world that needed exactly who you were. She was the woman who'd been judged before she spoke, who'd been measured and found wanting by every conventional standard, who'd arrived at this ranch feeling unwanted and out of place. But she was also the woman who'd dragged her injured husband to safety, who'd worked the ranch alone when she had to, who'd faced down a mountain lion in a stampede and a difficult birth, who'd built a home from nothing but determination and love. She was strong because this land demanded it. She was capable because she'd refused to accept anything less from herself. She was loved because she'd found someone who saw past her size to the person underneath. And most importantly, she'd learned that worth wasn't something granted by others' acceptance. It was something you claimed for yourself through your actions, through your choices, through simply refusing to quit when quitting would have been easier. Rose would grow up knowing that, would grow up on this ranch learning that strength came in many forms, that beauty was subjective, that the only opinion that mattered was your own. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb asked. "The future, what we're building here." And I think it's going to be something good." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Something worth all the hard work." "It already is." He was right. It already was. Not perfect. Perfection was a lie anyway, a standard designed to make people feel inadequate. But it was real. It was theirs. And it was built on a foundation stronger than any perfect facade could ever be. Built on truth, on effort, on the kind of love that grew slowly, earned through shared hardship and mutual respect. Built on the determination of a woman who'd refused to accept that she didn't belong anywhere, who'd claimed her space in this world and defended it against every doubt, every fear, every voice that said she wasn't enough. She was enough. She'd always been enough. And finally, she believed it. The stars wheeled overhead, constant and bright. Inside, their daughter slept. Around them, the ranch they'd built together stood solid against the Montana night. And tomorrow, they'd wake up and do it all again. The hard work, the small joys, the daily act of building a life worth living. Not because it was easy, but because it was theirs. And that made all the difference.